Baseball ASMR. Hello, welcome and welcome back to Baseball ASMR, a channel where we talk about baseball in a relaxing way. Today I thought I'd do a video previewing the upcoming MLB season. A lot of you seem to enjoy the WBC preview video that I just did, as well as previews that I've done for the past offseason and the playoffs before that. So I thought, why not do a preview of the upcoming season? I originally wasn't going to do a ton of research, but if you know me by now, I often overdo it. So today I'm just going to do the NL, and we'll do the AL in a separate video. So for anyone who says I have an East Coast or Yankees bias, how about that? So I didn't do a ton of research, but I did do some on every team. So hopefully I'll do like 5-10 minutes on each team, and some a little bit less, some a little bit more, depending. There's a few teams who aren't really worth covering in depth, and you know who you are. Before we get started, there's one thing to keep in common, and that's the WBC. A lot of players from the MLB are playing in the WBC, so there's a fair amount of teams that have players who aren't in normal spring training for their squads. The teams with the most are the Mariners and Mets with 18, the Blue Jays with 15, Brewers with 14, the Yankees, Cubs, and Orioles have 13, the A's and D-backs surprisingly have 12, and the Phillies have 11. But those numbers include minor leaguers too, so hard to say how many 26-man players are playing for each team. Before we dive into the teams, I just thought I would start with a reminder that this is the first season of ABS, or Automated Ball Strikes, system in MLB. It's not a fully automated system. It was implemented in the minors in the past couple years, and then in spring training last year, and now spring training this year. It's a challenge system, so you get 2 challenges per team for the first 9 innings, and if you're right, you keep it. So in theory, you could have unlimited if you were never wrong, but you get 2 for the first 9 innings, and then you get 1 per extra inning if you start that inning with 0. So like if you still have 2 from regular play, then you would carry 2 into the 10th inning. Only the pitcher, catcher, and hitter may initiate a challenge, and they have to do so within 2 seconds of the pitch call. And they do so by tapping the hat or helmet and also saying it out loud. So, because sometimes guys adjust their batting helmet. The whole thing hopefully will take about 15 seconds or less eventually. Right now it's probably a little bit more, but they'll get it down. It's sort of like if you used to watch tennis, for the longest time they had human beings calling in or out calls or faults on serves, the linesmen and women. And then they switched to a challenge system for a little while. So they had Hawkeye, which is a camera system. I think it's high-speed camera. And it's also used in baseball too. And so they would have, each tennis player would have a certain amount of challenges per match. And they would challenge a call, and then it would go to the instant replay with Hawkeye. and the crowd would get into it and start clapping along, and it took about 10, 15 seconds, and then you would know whether it was in or out or fault or a let or whatever. And so I think that's eventually where we'll get with this. Tennis now has fully automated line calls, except for Wimbledon, of course. But I think baseball will eventually get there. But for now, this is a good hybrid system to keep all the veterans happy and not change too fast. Well, fans too. So let's start out west, the NL West, and I'm going to go by odds to win the division. I think this was from DraftKings, but I don't really remember. No free ads. Where else would we start when we talk about the NL West? Then the Los Angeles Dodgers. And their odds to win are minus 650. They are the only negative odds to win their division, which means they are an overwhelming favorite. They don't want you to bet money on them. We'll start with players in. They have outfielder Kyle Tucker and closer Edwin Diaz. So basically the best hitter and the best pitcher, relief pitcher on the market this past offseason. They got both. Of course they did. Players out, we have starting pitcher Gonsolin, Tony. Relievers Michael Kopech, Kirby Yates, Anthony Banda, and outfielder Michael Conforto, former Met. So not a ton of turnover for the back-to-back World Series champions. Obviously, they don't feel like they need to make a lot of changes. They have the biggest payroll, the best team. They're the landing spot for all Japanese free agents, or so it seems, although a few went elsewhere this past offseason. Yeah, I mean, they're the envy of the entire sport. They do everything right. They scout well. They develop well. They draft well for their position. They sign all the big names in free agency. They make good trades, although recently I think other teams have been reluctant to trade with them because why help them? And like I said, they got the best hitter and the best relief pitcher on the market last offseason. They're looking to three-peat, which would be the first since the 98 to 2000 Yankees. And, you know, they're the envy of the sport, like I said. Why? Because they win. They spend all the money. People are envious that their teams can't spend that money. And, you know, that's something that's going to happen. You're going to hear a lot about that in the coming months. I don't want to turn this video into a CBA or salary cap video. I personally don't agree with the cap. I think there's lots of ways to fix the inequities in payroll between teams without putting a cap in, which is anti-player. But we can save all that for another day. There's plenty of ways to disincentivize massive spending because, you know, they signed Tucker to a contract that I think is $60 million a year, which is already is a lot because it's a short-term deal, so they'd want high value to get him. But because they're in the luxury tax, they have to pay 110% tax on top of that. So I think they're paying him like $120 million per year, which is utterly insane. That's more than some teams' entire payrolls. So yes, there are certainly massive problems with the differences in payroll, but let's not get into that. But you know who they are. I mean, they got Mookie, they got Freddie, and oh yeah, the two-way star, they have Shohei, who is playing for Japan right now in the WBC. And this is his first season as a Dodger where he will pitch and hit full-time because he was recovering last year from Tommy John or some elbow injury. So he was very, very slowly ramping up his pitching for the postseason. You know, they have Yamamoto. They have Glasnow. Sasaki, who was a bullpen star in the postseason. He will be a starter again. And they also have Edwin Diaz, Tanner Scott, Alex Vesia, and the rest of the pen. I will say that they're not inevitable. Before everyone gives up on the season and says they're just going to win, the Padres and Mets came close in 24 to beating them in the playoffs, in the NLDS and CS. And then, of course, last year, Toronto went to Game 7 of the World Series and looked like they had it won until they didn't. So, their money buys them better chances of winning. It's like they get more lottery tickets, but it doesn't mean they're going to win the lottery, but it does give them a better chance. So other teams can topple them. They're not indestructible. It's not a fait accompli that they're going to win the World Series this year. If the San Diego Padres next in terms of odds, they're plus 900. So quite a big gulf between minus 650 and plus 900 there. Players in, they have third baseman and outfielder Miguel Andujar, former Yankee. Infielder Sung Mun Song from the KBO. He was an all-star there last year. Starting pitchers Herman Marquez and Griffin Canning. And outfielder Nick Castellanos of Home Run Call fame. Players out, they lost. First baseman Luis Arias. First baseman outfielder Ryan O'Hearn. Catcher Elias Diaz. Infielder Jose Iglesias. And that's everybody in and out. They just went through a contentious family feud over control of the team. It seems like the dust has settled on that. And they just extended their GM, AJ Preller. So seemingly they are back to being a stable situation over there in San Diego. The past few years they spent lavishly to try and compete with the Dodgers because the late Peter Seidler owned the team and wanted to win. I think he was sick and he wanted to see the team win before he passed, but they got close and, almost beat the Dodgers in the playoffs, but didn't. And so the past few years, the family has been fighting over control of the team, but now they have settled that. And they're the only pro team in San Diego, and I think their expectations remain high, just like their attendance, but will the payroll and performance follow? That's kind of the big question. What's the payroll going to be? And performance. They still have a lineup of Tatis Jr., Machado, Bogarts, Jackson Merrill, Cronenworth, and they'll get a full season of Ramon Laureano, who was injured last year. And they have Michael King, Nick Pivetta, Joe Musgrove leading the rotation, and Mason Miller and Adrian Morjone in the back of the bullpen. So they have, top to bottom, a very good roster. But they lost Dylan Cease, Robert Suarez. I guess I didn't add those guys. So Cease and Suarez, of course. They lost those guys, that not their closer, but their setup man and one of their better starters, along with all these other guys. So I'm not sure the pieces in match the pieces out. And I don't know if they're going to be able to beat the Dodgers. And there are also some health concerns. I mean, Michael King is a little bit of a question mark, and some of their other guys have some health question marks, like any team really, but I don't think they'll be able to beat the Dodgers, but why not a wild card team, right? I mean, I think of all the NL teams, they probably have one of the better shots at winning a wild card because they're a good team when they put their mind to it. Moving on to the San Francisco Giants. They are plus 1,700, so you can see the odds jump here. Players in. This is where Luis Arias went. They got some starting pitchers in Tyler Mahle and Adrian Hauser. They got outfielder Harrison Bader and third baseman DH Devers, even though he was a trade last year, I think in June or May, but they'll get a full year of him this year. Players out. Just Justin Verlander, the starting pitcher. Oh, they also, after 4 seasons of 500 ball, they are looking to move back up the standings. They brought in new manager Tony Vitello from the University of Tennessee. And because he's coming from college ball, they will call some pitches from the dugout, like they do in college. If you're unaware, the manager calls the pitches usually in college, whereas in the pros, the pitcher or catcher will call it, usually the catcher. Despite Oracle Park being a pitcher's park, it's tough to hit there, and they're in the same division as the Dodgers. They still have a solid lineup. They have Luis Arias, they've got Devers, they've got Adames and Chapman. Jung-Hoo Lee, playing for Korea now in the WBC, and Elliot Ramos. So they have a decent lineup here. And last year, 4 of their primary starting pitchers had an ERA between 3.22 and 3.85, which is just what you want for your rotation. You want ERAs that start with a 3 all the way through. And their bullpen was top 5 last year in ERA and FIP, which is fielding independent pitching. So Verlander was up and down last year, but they brought in a couple guys to replace him. They've got some hitters. They've got some young guys like Tyler Fitzgerald. There's a world where they can win a wild card, but the division is definitely out of reach with 2 teams ahead of them, and one of them being the Dodgers. But, Buster Posey and Vitello are looking to turn the page here. They have a young core-ish with some veterans. Seems like a good mix here. They're back on the right track after sort of flattening out after, I think, 2021 when they won over 100 games and challenged the Dodgers for the division. They are going to be a good team this year, but I don't know if they'll be great. I mean, not that I'm doing predictions, because predictions are crazy. Like Ken Rosenthal, the writer, always says, tell me who's getting traded and tell me who's getting hurt, and then I'll tell you my predictions, because those have such a big impact. But I don't probably not a playoff team this year. But you never know. I mean, people said that about Toronto last year. Next is the Diamondbacks in Arizona. And their odds are plus 2,200. They brought in Nolan Arenado, Merrill Kelly. They brought him back. I think he left for a year. And Michael Soroka, former Brave. And players out. Outfielder Jake McCarthy. And Blaze Alexander. So, after losing the 2023 World Series to the Rangers, they've sort of been up and down. They went 89, 73, and 24. And then last season, they went 80 and 82. And they finished third in the West. Although they did lose to the IL, they had A.J. Puck, Corbin Burns, their ace, and Justin Martinez for the whole season. So kind of hard to dock them for that. But are they really a contender? You know, the playoff run in 2023 was 2023 playoff run was their only run since 2017. So, and the only time they won more than one game since 2011. More than one win. So, you know, they've been close, but they haven't been great. The past couple of years, they've also lost Eugenio Suarez and Josh Naylor, and I don't know if these new guys are making up for that kind of production. You know, Nolan Arenado's on the back end of his career, and Merrill Kelly and Soroka are good, but they're not aces like Kurt Schilling back in the day or Randy Johnson. Plus, they've got 3 teams ahead of them in the odds, and I would say that that's accurate. This is another season where they probably don't make the playoffs, but they could be competitive. They could put it together. You never know. But yeah, they are comfortably fourth in the division. And last in the NL West, Colorado Rockies. Where else would they be but the bottom? Sorry if you're from Denver. Their odds, I have to do it on a new line because it is 5 digits. Plus 30,000. This is the longest odds of any team to win their division. That's all I'm going to write for Colorado because nobody knows what they're doing, including the Rockies. They hired Paul Podesta, a.k.a. Jonah Hill from Moneyball, to turn things around, and they have a seemingly decent young lineup. You know, they've got Ezekiel Tovar, Hunter Goodman, but as always, a mile up in the atmosphere, the pitching is going to be the issue. It's so hard to pitch up there because it's so different than at sea level or where the other parks are. But who knows? Maybe Moneyball Paul can turn things around. But I would not count on them being good this year. But possibly, hopefully, they can be not historically bad as they have been in the past few years. So we'll move now to the Central. And the best odds in the Central are the Chicago Cubs. They are plus 115. Players in. Third baseman Alex Bregman, former Astro and Red Sox. Starting pitcher Edward Cabrera, who the Yankees tried to get from Miami, but they ended up with him. And relievers Phil Maton and Hobie Milner. Players out. They lost Kyle Tucker, who they had for 1 year, and Owen Casey, their top prospect, or one of them. He went in the deal for Cabrera. They lost reliever Andrew Kittredge, who I always think of Mission Impossible with that name, the original. They also lost Brad Keller, a reliever, and starting pitcher Aaron Savali. So they brought in some good talent here. Edward Cabrera is a good young pitcher who the Yankees were trying to get. He has a good repertoire, and I think, with a few tweaks can be even better. Bregman is a good, he's a good replacement for Tucker. Tucker is a better hitter, but he's pretty good if you need to replace him. And last year, they had higher expectations signing Tucker. They won the wild card round against the Padres. but they fell to the Brewers in the NLDS, who would go on to get swept by the Dodgers. So with these moves, they bolstered the lineup rotation and bullpen, and their lineup is pretty good. They've got PCA, Pete Crow Armstrong, Michael Bush, you got Breggy, Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Moises Ballesteros, and Carson Kelly. And that, my friends, is one of the deepest lineups, right up there with the Dodgers, in my opinion. The Dodgers' top players are better, but this is just as deep, in my opinion. Their rotation, they've got Boyd, Cabrera, Cade Horton, Shota Imanaga, and Jameson Taillon. And that's pretty solid, too. That's similarly deep as the lineup. The bullpen's not the best in the league, but, with a good lineup and a good rotation, you would hope you can piece the bullpen together, maybe slide one of these guys to the bullpen in the postseason, and maybe some young guys can kind of step up in roles from the minors. But I think this is a team that's good enough to win the division. Obviously, so do the odds makers. Losing Tucker and top prospect Owen Casey definitely hurts, and we know the wind is tough early on in the year in Chicago and Wrigley. But they've got a good mix of old and young, hungry and experienced, guys who have been there before and guys who haven't. I think they can win the NL Central. And frankly, they may be able to have a 1 or 2 seed and have a wild card round bye. I think we're all thinking that the Dodgers will be a 1 or 2 seed, so it's between the Central and the East to come up with the second spot for a bye. But I think they can do it. The Cubs, I think it's their time. It's been exactly 10 years this year since they won the World Series. They bottomed out, got rid of Javi Baez and Rizzo and all those guys. Were not good for a few years, and now they are back. Next in the NL Central odds are the Milwaukee Brewers. And their odds are plus 275. Players in? None, really. And players out? Just the one, starting pitcher Freddie Peralta. The team that is 24th in payroll. But last year, they were number 1 in record. So, who's to say that they had to make a lot of moves? They didn't think they did. They beat the Cubs. They went to the NLCS. Yes, they lost to the Dodgers, but who wouldn't have, right? And sure, they lost Peralta, but when has that phased them, They lost their ace. But they've lost people before, They lost Corbin Burns. They lost Josh Hader, Devin Williams, and they keep winning and making the playoffs. So why not just keep running it back? They have a good lineup, a dogged lineup, who grind out at bats and run the bases well. They run the bases well. They play good defense. They play baseball, in other words. They're sort of the anti-analytics crazed team, right? I mean, there was a year where the Yankees had all right-handed hitters because they thought they could have some sort of advantage. And it was like, no, you could just throw righties against them and win. The pitching is good, and the bullpen's good. That's both, the starting pitching and the pen. So why not just keep the small market mindset, flip your budding stars like Peralta for prospects and keep it going? I mean, Who says you need $400 million in payroll to win the World Series? Well, maybe the fact that they were swept last year in the playoffs. They did not win one game against the Dodgers, even though they went 6-0 against them in the regular season. That just shows you how the Dodgers operate. You know, they have all these extra players. They basically have like a full rotation on the IL at any given time. And then they just, slowly work guys back in for October. And so, you can beat them in the regular season because they're not at full strength. They're just waiting for October. That's what a lot of big market teams do. But the Brewers, they are who they are. They have a lot of short kings. They have good guys, but maybe not big stars. So the jury's still out. Small ball. Can it beat big payrolls? The jury's still out because they got swept last year, and the Blue Jays play a version of small ball kind of like them, but they also supplement it with slug and swing and miss. So it's not quite a one-to-one comparison. Next, we have the Cincinnati Reds. And they are plus 425 for the division. Players in are third baseman Eugenio Suarez, a.k.a. Gino. Relievers Emilio Pagan and Caleb Ferguson, as well as Pierce Johnson. Players out: Nick Martinez, Gavin Lux, and outfielders Austin Hayes and Andujar. They've been fun and competitive for a few years, even since the Castellanos days. And they won a wild card spot last year, although that had more to do with the Mets melting down in the second half than them winning. But they were there. They made the playoffs, and they got swept in 2 games by the Dodgers. But, they've still got Tito. Not Tito Martinez. Tito Francona. He's turned the ship around, right? I mean, they almost got Kyle Schwarber, and then pivoted to Eugenio Suarez along with a few others. They had a good offseason. They got a good manager. The lineup's pretty good. They got Suarez. They've got Ellie De La Cruz. They have Hunter Green leading the rotation and Andrew Abbott. They got a good closer coming in Pagan. They're probably, are they going to win the Central winners? Probably not. But why couldn't they win a wild card? I think the Pirates may leapfrog them this year. And personally, the odds makers have them next. But Cincinnati is a good team that got a little bit better. And Tito's a good manager. And you never know what they can do. I don't know anything about their farm system. But, some young guys take the leap. Some veterans, have a few tweaks and have a good year. You never know what they can do. They might be a legit wild card threat. They might be a central threat. I don't know. But personally, I think they might get a wild card. But I think the next team, the Pirates, are on the verge of a big step forward. I think that's a popular theory for this year, maybe. Comment below what you think about the Central here. What do you think about the Pirates? Next, we have the Pirates of Pittsburgh. And they are plus 600. So it's not that far behind Cincinnati. The odds makers also believe that they have taken a step forward. So players they brought in: Marcell Ozuna, the DH, second baseman Brandon Lau, right fielder Ryan O'Hearn. Can I fit that? That's O'Hearn. Sorry for the sloppiness. And then relievers: Gregory Soto, Mason Montgomery. And then they've also brought in bench outfielders Jake Mangum, who's a good bench piece, and I do not know how to say this name, just Nixon Garcia. So they brought in a fair amount of guys at different roles and players out. Starting pitcher Mike Burrows, as well as Oviedo. And then DH McCutch, who is still unsigned, unfortunately, and they also lost outfielder Tommy Pham. So I think the players in are better than the players out. Don't be surprised if they make the playoffs. Don't be surprised if they make the wild card round. They've got the ace and Cy Young winner. Cy Young, ace, Skeens, former rookie of the year too. The pitching staff behind him is solid. They've got Mitch Keller. You've got Ashcraft. And you got Bubba. You got Bubba Chandler. And Jose Urquidy. That is a good rotation right there. And of course, the big story this spring is the number one prospect in baseball, shortstop Connor Griffin. Now, you never know what's going to happen with prospects, but he's supposed to be a very good player. He's probably going to come up and join the team sometime this year, and he'll join O'Neal Cruz in the lineup and Brian Reynolds, along with Ozuna and Lau and O'Hearn. This is a solid team. I really think they'll make a wild card this year. I think this is their year. Again, who knows with predictions? It's anyone's guess, but I think this is the team to watch in the NL to make the biggest jump. Although the Giants have a case for that too. And then lastly, in the NL Central, we have the St. Louis Cardinals, who have long odds as well, 2,500 plus 2,500. They only brought in Dustin May, the starting pitcher from Boston, but they've shipped out a fair amount of guys. They got rid of the franchise player, Nolan Arenado. They got rid of starting pitchers Sonny Gray and Miles Michaelis. And they got rid of first baseman and catcher Wilson Contreras. And the utility guy, Brendan Donovan. After several years of slowly taking over the minors, I think, and now the majors, Chaim Bloom is fully in charge as the GM or president of operations, whatever they call him. But they've been flirting with the basement for several years, and now they are in a full-on rebuild. They've shipped out all their good players. There's not much to look forward to this year, although I will mention I would go for the $29 ticket. That is all you can eat and drink. Obviously no alcohol. That's where they make their money. But it's a huge menu of things you can eat and drink for $29 this year. That's the reason to go. Also, it's a nice ballpark. Nice to get to see a game no matter how good the team is if you like baseball. But this squad is not going to do anything this year. And they're going to take a year and figure out who on the roster stays and goes in the coming years, and which prospects are good, and what they'll figure out what to do. But this is not a year where they are going to do anything of import. So next we have the NL East, and the team with the best odds to win the East in the NL are the New York Mets. They are plus 165. Players in, get ready, this is a lot. Freddie Peralta. Shortstop Bo Bichette. First baseman and DH Jorge Polanco. Second baseman Marcus Semien. Outfielder Luis Robert Jr. Relievers Luke Weaver and Devin Williams. Those are all the players in and all the players out. Starting pitchers Frankie Montas and Brandon Sproat. First baseman and franchise home run record holder Pete Alonso. Closing pitcher Edwin Diaz. Second baseman Jeff McNeil and Luis Angel Acuna. Outfielders Cedric Mullins and Starling Marte and Brandon Nimmo and Jesse Winker. 4 outfielders they lost. And relievers Tyler Rogers and Ryan Helsley. I mean, look at that. I think this might be the most players moving in and out of a team, of any team in the NL. Maybe even the AL as well. Maybe the entire MLB. So, Uncle Steve, his money was supposed to equal wins. And they were supposed to be the Dodgers East, right? That's what the promise was when he took over. But the Mets have only made the playoffs twice since 2016, both wild-card berths under Cohen and Stearns. The money has helped rehabilitate their image. The image is back. People want to go there now. It's sort of like the Knicks. The money has helped rehabilitate the image of both franchises. And yet, LOL Mets. They were swept in the wild card in 22. They missed the playoffs. So, swept in the wild card in 22. No playoffs in 23. 24, surprise success with the Trumpets and OMG and what was that guy's name? What's the purple guy's? And Grimace. They made it to Game 6 of the NLCS against those hated Dodgers. And then they signed Soto away from my Yankees. It was finally time. They were there. They were a franchise of relevance. They arrived at perennial relevance, and it was time to start playing with the big boys. And in 25, they started out 45-24. But then they melted down. They went 38-55 the rest of the way, and they lost their wild card to Cincinnati. And then this offseason, they ship out all these players, including the best closer in the game and the home run leader for your team. You bring in a bunch of other guys, and there are some good players in this group that are coming in, but there were also some good players that went away. So it's a little hard to see into the future with this team. I mean, they have a good lineup. They still have Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco, Semien, alongside candidates with upside like Luis Robert and Carson Bench. They're hoping that those two outfielders can take a step forward and that Francisco Alvarez can rebound. I heard a podcast recently about some swing change he was making that should help him out. And then their starting rotation, they've got Peralta, Nolan McLean, who's a really good pitcher and is pitching for Team USA in the WBC. Sean Manaea, who had a bit of a down year last year, but is a solid guy. Hopefully he can go back to 2024 form. And they've still got Peterson and Holmes, too, and as well as Kodai Senga. So it looks like they're going with a 6-man rotation, or maybe there's just competition for the last spot. But they have a good lineup, good rotation. You know, the high leverage relievers they brought in from the Yankees, Williams and Weaver. I don't know if I would have done that, having watched them a whole year in the Bronx. I don't think they can fill the Edwin Diaz-sized hole in the bullpen. Weaver totally lost it last year, whether he was tipping pitches or just lost confidence in what he was throwing. He lost the closer's role. Devin Williams has never looked comfortable in a big market. They both look like setup guys, not closers. But, you know, who knows? Maybe they can turn it around. You never know. Relievers are very volatile. All in all, like I said, I don't know what to do with this team. I think they have a very high ceiling and maybe a middling to low floor. I could see them not making the playoffs, frankly. But I think they could be a number 1 or 2 seed, you know? It's them and the Cubs, I think, are the top 2 teams vying for that second bye in the first round in the NL. I mean, the Phillies and the Braves, I'm sure, have something to say about that. But I think the Mets have the strongest roster other than the Cubs in the NL behind the Dodgers. Next, after the Mets in the NL East, are the Philadelphia Phillies. And they are plus 190. So they're not that far behind the Mets. 165 and 190. And I will give you a spoiler alert that the Braves are next, and they also have plus 190 odds. So it's not really like the Phillies are in sole possession here of second place in the odds. They are tied for second. And why are they tied? Well, they brought in reliever Brad Keller and Zach Pop. And they brought in outfielder Adolis Garcia, who was a big part of the 2024 Rangers World Series. They lost Max Kepler, Ranger Suarez, Harrison Bader, and Castellanos, he of Dugout Beer fame. Reliever Matt Strahm, Romano, Jordan, and David Robertson, who retired. So, what's up with the Phillies? It's the same great core. But another year older. Is the window still open? They won 96 games last year, followed by a devastating sweep in the NLDS by the Dodgers. Now, that might be a little misleading because even though it was only the NLDS, it was the Dodgers. So had they met someone else in the NLDS, maybe they would have made it to the CS and lost to the Dodgers. But the sweep either way after a 96-win season is tough to stomach. They still have Harper, Schwarber, Turner, Real Muto, and Bowman Marsh. And that's a good lineup. And they still have Sanchez, Luzardo, Nola, Taiwan Walker, and Andrew Painter. So they have a good Painter. Sorry, it's a little messy. They have a good rotation. And they still have Joan, Duran, and Brad Keller, and Alvarado. and Orion Kirkring. On paper, they have a great roster. But since losing the 22 World Series to the Astros, they have not gotten back. They fell one game short in the 2023 NLCS, and that was to the Diamondbacks, who were really hot at the time, but they just haven't made their way back. They've been a very good core. They've made some moves here and there, but they've relied on their same core, and they had a really devastating last play last year, which we don't have to get into, but they've been close but no cigar for 4 seasons now. So can they do it this year? Yeah, they can win the East. They can be a wild card team. I expect to see them in the playoffs, but I don't know if they're a World Series team because they haven't made it back there in a while and they haven't won it. So that remains to be seen. Expectations are high. My friend Matt Gelb covers the team for The Athletic, so I know this is sort of my team away from my team in the NL. I follow them more than any other NL team, so I'm hoping and rooting for them, but, we'll see. Next, like I said, the same odds as the Phillies are the Atlanta Braves, plus 190. They are looking for a bounce back here. They've got reliever Robert Suarez coming in. I'm just going to put Yaz. It's Mike Yastrzemski. Utility player Mauricio Dubon, who I believe is playing in the WBC. And players out, they lost Ozuna. They lost Manoah. Infielder Nick Allen. And reliever Pierce Johnson to the Cubs. Like I said, this is the year of the bounce back for Atlanta. They made the playoffs every year from 2018 to 2024, which I assume is the best mark in that time. I don't think any other team probably did that. I did not look that up, but I would assume that that's true. Correct me if I'm wrong. But since then, last year they had terrible injuries. 2025. And they'd missed the playoffs for the first time in a while. First time in that many years they missed the playoffs. Last year on the IL, the players that spent significant time: Acuna, Sale, Austin Riley. All include Jurickson Profar, who lost half a year to a suspension last year, but he's losing the whole year this year. Unfortunately, he tested positive again. Spencer Schwellenbach. Strider. Don't need 2 R's, do we? Spencer Strider and AJ Smith. Shawver. So look at all those. Those are like some of their best players that lost a lot of time last year. And so this year, in 26, they start with Hassan Kim and Sean Murphy on the IL. They're out till May, and Profar's gone, but now they have all these players back, and they've also got Drake Baldwin, Matt Olson, Ozzie Albies, and Michael Harris too, the second. And then in the rotation, they've got Chris Sale, Strider, and Lopez. And then you've got Robert Suarez in from the Padres to help out Raisel Iglesias in the bullpen. It's a really good roster. I think with health, they are definitely 100% a wild card team. They could challenge for the division. You never know. It comes down to those handful of division games against Philadelphia and New York. But it really comes down to the injury bug again. And I don't know how much they were counting on Jurickson Profar. I think they obviously were hoping for a better year this year, and now he's out the whole year. that just happened recently. So I don't know what their plans are. In light of that, maybe it's more time for Mike Yastrzemski, or they have other prospects. I'm not sure. I mean, they have a good roster. I remember Nacho, what's his face, at third. He's a good third baseman. Yeah, I think, if they're in it, if they're in the mix at the trade deadline, watch out. Because Alex Anthopoulos is going to make some moves. In fourth place in the NL East by odds are the Miami Marlins. And they're plus 4,000. So I will go into some detail here because I like the Marlins. They've won a World Series. They have good players from time to time. They brought in Owen Casey, I believe the Cubs' top prospect, in that trade for Cabrera. They've also brought in Estuary Ruiz, reliever Pete Fairbanks, and John King, and infielder Christopher Morel, and starting pitcher Chris Paddock. Players they lost, Cabrera, the starting pitcher, and Ryan Weathers to my Yankees. Outfielders Joey Weimer and Dane Myers, as well as a first baseman, Eric Wagaman, I guess. I don't know this guy. So, look, the Marlins are bottom payroll. They're in the bottom, bottom three payroll. They lost the NLDS in 2020. They lost the wild card in 2023. They lost Kim Ng, the first female GM, a few years ago, and they lost Derek Jeter. Why? Because they refused to spend money and make the team better. I know baseball is tough in Florida in warmer weather. It's not the greatest market for baseball, but at the same time, they don't draft or develop well. They just aren't really a well-run organization. Let's just leave it there. We don't need to be too disparaging, but the Miami Marlins are interesting. They do have some players. They've got Stowers. They have some good pitching. They still have Sandy Alcantara, at least until the trade deadline, when they're going to try and flip him, because they couldn't do it last year because he had a tough year after Tommy John and didn't get a full year of great stats. So, I don't think they have a squad that can make the playoffs. Can they win some series? Yeah, they beat the tar out of my Yankees last summer. Embarrassed them in Miami. So they're a decent team. I think they'll be a fun watch, but I don't know what they're going to be doing other than drawing some nominal crowds and cash revenue sharing checks and try to, just do whatever they want. Let's just say, if they're a small market team in Miami, they're very different than a small market team in Milwaukee, who does it very well up there, or even across the state in Tampa, who is a small market team but does pretty well. And then lastly, we have the Washington Nationals. I'm not going to erase this here because we're not going to go into much depth here. They're plus 10,000 for the division. Just remember 2019. It's 7 years ago, yes, 6.5, whatever. But you won the World Series. You had a great core. You haven't been great since. You've lost a lot of players. You haven't really contended for much. You have a good core, C.J. Abrams and whatnot, but I don't think you're going to make much noise. I don't think it's worth going into a lot of detail about their roster. Just, look back at 2019 and cherish all the great things that happened that year. And, Patrick Corbin, Harper, Rendon, Scherzer, Sanchez, Soto, and Trey Turner. Just remember all those things, because I don't think this year is going to be your year. And that does it for my NL preview. Just a little bit about each team. If I had to make some predictions, which, who knows? I don't think they'll come true. But the easy thing to say is that you think the Dodgers will emerge from the NL ultimately. But for division winners, we'll say in the West, I'm going to pick the Dodgers. In the Central, I'm going to pick the Cubs. And in the East, I'm going to pick the Braves. And then the wild cards, let's, in any order, I'm going to say the Padres, the Pirates, and the Phillies. And I think the Mets will not make it again this year. But you never know. I guess I kind of lined up one from each division here. But it never works out that way, does it? That's the video. Let me know what you think. I'm sure this is going to be a very fun comment section where everyone gets along and everyone agrees and no one will have anything bad to say. Let me know what you think. If I got your team wrong, I apologize, but this is my little preview here. I will do one on the AL soon. And thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.